And sometimes we think of the Christian life as something that happens all inside, right? This spiritual work that God does. And that's partially true, but the work that God does is not only on the inside. It's not only in the deep interiors of our hearts and minds. Like a seed that is planted in fertile soil, we don't see the transformation from the seed to the root system. But eventually, new life bursts up from the soil. And we see what has been happening all along and was hidden. That new growth shows the life of the unseen work of God. So as believers, we know that the Spirit is working. We know that God is working in our lives, that we're forgiven, that we're redeemed, we're restored, all these great things that's happening underground. But there's new life that bursts forth that everyone can see and appreciate and thank God for. As Christians, we're to nurture this life and work of the Spirit. Right? We can't expect the new work of God to flourish in the garden of our lives if we continue to follow after those old patterns, old desires of our old life. If we continue to participate in the hedonism that we did before you were a new Christian. Right? When you become a believer, you are a new creation. And we lean into that and we act it out. The new creation that God has done. So you work out the new muscles that God has given you. The weight is too heavy for us to lift. So don't try to live a godly life without God. You will fail. You will hurt yourself. Maybe even hurt others. We can't be selfless and humble unless our lives are centered around God. Our good actions come up like filthy rags. But instead, put the burden of weight on God's ample shoulders. We put it on God's completed work in Christ on the cross. That we become people who are saved and redeemed and restored. And through God's work in us, we're able to live holy and godly lives. Through God's work in us, we're able to love deeply and forgive others. We're able to give generously because we know that the source of our giving is from God Himself. We're able to love people who are a little bit hard to love because it's God who works and moves in us. It's God who fuels us. It's He who shapes our motivation for living and working and protects us and protects our hearts from things that take away our focus. The good news is that God's requirements of you and God's good plans for you are within your reach because God Himself is working in you to accomplish and fulfill them with God's strength.